I'm an artist. Well, an artist by hobby, I suppose. I usually take commissions and had been doing pretty well for some time, getting more and more work from clients who were willing to pay more and more. I had finally finished up some admittedly weird fan art commissions for a story called The Dip, and was feeling pretty confident in my ability to get to work on several client requests I had put on hold. Of course, things didn't quite go as planned. Looking back now, it probably started the very minute I woke up that Saturday afternoon in mid-February, but it didn't really hit me until much later that night, as I sat at my computer and sketched away. A twitch in my wrist, almost like an involuntary hiccup, accompanied by a little jab of pain, so focused and soft it almost seemed cute, playful. My fingers would relax slightly, the light muscle spasm flicking my pen across my tablet and disrupting whatever line I had been attempting. It only happened once every other 5 minutes or so, and honestly, I half figured it had been there my entire life. But it hadn't always been there. And it was getting worse. By the time 3 o'clock in the morning rolled around and I still sat hunched over my monitor, my fingers had begun to blister as I pressed them impossibly tight against the pen in an attempt to stop the twitch. It was happening nearly every 30 seconds now. Some invisible needle stabbed into my flesh and wrenched my muscles away from my control. It was more painful now, lasted longer now, and was anything but cute. I had always known arthritis was coming for me, or perhaps this was carpal tunnel. I had never truly bothered to see which each entailed or the differences, since I figured the end result was the same. In my line of work, sitting cramped up and clenching around a small pen or mouse for hours on end, everyone succumbed eventually. But surely this was a little strange. I hardly thought I was old enough to be degrading now in this weird, strangely regular spasm. Certainly that wasn't common. Finally, too frustrated to continue working, I wrote it off as a muscle spasm that would be solved by a good night's rest. And sleep did come surprisingly well. I awoke the next morning without even a thought of the previous night's occurrences. I didn't feel a thing in my wrist and didn't remember the event at all as I groggily poured some cereal. As the Lucky Charms turned to soggy mush in front of my tired eyes, I absent-mindedly swirled the bowl with one finger. I was never hungry. Why did I even bother pretending to pour cereal? It was well past breakfast time anyway, I might as well have just made dinner. The sun was already sinking below the abysmal, gray clouds encompassing the harbor. Some sort of depressing snow and rain combination lightly sprinkled at my skinny, prison-like windows. I sighed. The days here never changed. The grayscale world of outside crept into my small, single-room apartment like a dense fog, bleaching away any hope of being productive today. I watched the marshmallows in front of me fade to a haunting gray as I tapped my fingers on the bowl. I sighed again, taking a big, deep breath before finally willing myself to stand and dump out the disgusting mush I had created. After some more willing, I slumped down in front of my computer and lazily slapped the monitor on. My email screen greeted me. 3 new commission requests waiting to be read. I blinked slowly, not even able to make it through the subject line of the first one before closing the window and sighing. I wasn't in the mood today. If I could just finish up the commission I had started yesterday night, that would be good enough for me to call it a day. I didn't quite remember how far I had gotten, but I was fairly certain I had at least finished the line art. I opened back up my paint program and double-clicked the recent file. The image loaded up, and I simply stared at the screen that flickered lightly in front of me. I blinked slowly, then squeezed my eyes shut, somehow half expecting the image to change when I reopened them. It didn't. My lid slid open slowly before narrowing as I began scrolling around the image. It was just scribbles. There was barely any coherence at all, just jagged, rough lines carved into the screen in no discernible manner. It was in no way a picture, and certainly not what I remembered drawing. Frowning, I navigated back up to my recent files and scrolled through them, opening a few up just to be sure. None of the other images had changed, and there was no other file I could have been confusing my current one for. Had I really just been scribbling the whole time? I finally remembered the spasms I had experienced before, but certainly that didn't account for it. I definitely got frustrated near the end and started drawing really dark, heavy lines, and maybe I started scribbling a bit, but I was certain I'd at least started to form some kind of picture before that. I clawed at my head, racking my brain to try and remember. Nothing came to me. Scowling now, I angrily cleared the document, now staring at a perfectly blank canvas, the blinding white abyss enough to make me flinch. I tried to blink some of the brightness away, stretched my fingers out and haphazardly grabbed for my tablet pen. The cool plastic felt unpleasant in my fingers, but as I pressed the tip to the tablet and tried to adjust my grip, it suddenly returned. The twitch. My hand cramped up as if smashed with a hammer, my wrist snapping so violently I might have thrown the pen across the room if my fingers hadn't simultaneously clenched tight. I yanked my hand back in agony, my muscles continuing to constrict even as I watched, my knuckles going dead white, tendons straining beyond capacity as I swore I could hear them begin to tear. My attempts to relinquish my grip were met by unresponsive muscles as a plastic pen began to crack under the pressure. My eyes were wide with horror and pain, my other hand splayed out uselessly at my side. Seconds before I was certain my hand would snap the pen in half before tearing itself to shreds. The sensation finally pulled back, my fingers twitching back to resting position, the pen just barely staying in my grip. I took several deep breaths, now afraid to try my luck at moving a finger for fear of another spasm taking hold. I just slowly brought my hand back to the counter and rested it on the cold wood. My breaths were still shaky and ragged, but as my gaze flashed back to my screen, they cut to nothing as my lungs deflated. The face stared back at me like a horrid, screaming abomination, features constructed from jagged, scribbled lines. I physically recoiled, adrenaline feeling like ice as it flashed through my veins. What the hell? I again blinked several times and tried to squeeze my eyes shut until the picture changed, but the same horrid thing greeted me. It was crude, almost as if hidden amongst the scribbles, but it was far too clear to be a mistake. Its jaw unhinged from its slender, bony face, eyelids peeled back in a never-ending stare as its silent, horrendous scream escaped its dead lips. I felt my skin crawl with insects, the dull room surrounding me instantly dropping in temperature. How? I looked back to my hand, shakily gripping the pen. I had just briefly spasmed slightly to the right of the tablet. It should have made maybe a line or two, and yet the screen was filled. I moved to erase the document before I even knew what I was doing, my panicked hands blindly attempting to do anything to get rid of the horrid thing. But as my hand attempted to drop the pen and progressed over the tablet even less than an inch, the once cute twitch made another appearance, this time a semi-truck driving over my pale hand. I felt the breath leave my body as my teeth clenched in agony, my other hand rushing to uselessly pat at my dysfunctional digits that again splintered with the force they were constricting. My eyes closed unintentionally as I brought the hand to my chest and curled it into a ball, rocking for what felt like several minutes before the feeling finally let up again, the pen dropping into my lap with a soft pat as my fingers loosened. I should have been prepared. I should have had some kind of inclination of what I would find when I opened my eyes again. But I couldn't have been less prepared for what greeted me. Another face was drawn onto the screen, even larger than the last, scribbled right over top the first one. Leaving the pen in my lap, I quickly rushed my other hand forward and closed out of the document. The screen flickered lightly, the program prompting me to save before deleting it. I quickly clicked it no, and the document disappeared, leaving only the first document I had opened behind it. The scribbled one I had drawn last night. Only I now realized it wasn't scribbles at all, but layers and layers of faces. Countless gruesome corpses looming in at me in such numbers parts of the screen were simply black. I again quickly shut out of the document, this time simply exiting the entire program. Now, back at my desktop, I could feel my hands shaking, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling with a cold breath. I shivered, stealing another glance outside as nighttime consumed the miserable harbor below me. The snowy, rainy sleet had really begun to pick up now. I shook my head, then closed my eyes, then shook my head even harder. I was trying to dislodge whatever I had just seen, everything I was thinking. It was all insane. In those moments, those brief intervals, I had lost control of my hand. To think I could draw such horrid things, it was absurd. Sure, they were crude, almost cartoony, but even then, I must have simply been seeing things that weren't really there. My mind subconsciously putting faces in where there were only scribbles. I felt better after thinking this, my eyes slowly opening again to see my desktop as I lightly massaged my twitching hand. I sighed, then took a deep breath, flinching as my fingers pressed against my raw, sore flesh as I massaged it. One way or another, I figured I should probably speak to a doctor about my sudden condition. This couldn't be normal. My hands lightly rested on the keyboard as I typed in my general practitioner's office and searched for a number to call. And that's when the thunder began. Always in the background of this dismal night, suddenly erupting into a violent crack outside my window. I flinched slightly, glancing out into the darkness only to see another flash of lightning that was almost immediately followed by a deafening explosion. The sleet became driving rain, my window shuddering at the force, the lights of my room seeming to dim slightly before another flash of light saw my computer go dark with a soft click. Then everything went out. Darkness now enveloped me as my soft green computer light faded into blackness and my own hands became lost in front of me. Another crack of thunder. And then several knocks. I bolted upright, eyes flashing into the darkness of my room towards my front door. A flash of lightning allowed me to see I was looking in the right direction, the door hauntingly tall and narrow as something stood behind its semi-translucent glass window. It knocked again, the deafening cracks almost as loud as the thunder before shuffling erupted out from under the door. This is where I must admit I do not lock my door when I'm inside, and where I also must admit that I believe I've made a grave mistake. The door slowly creaked open as the shuffling grew louder in the darkness, and I knew the next flash of light would reveal to me something I didn't want to see. But something I had seen before. They say artists subconsciously draw from what they know. But I'm afraid my twitch wasn't so much a spasm as it was a warning. Drawing from what I would come to know.